On November 14th, 1998, the members of the Tectonic Theatre Project traveled to Laramie, Wyoming, and conducted interviews with the people of the town. During the next year, they would return to Laramie several times and conduct over 200 interviews. The play you are about to see is edited from those interviews, as well as from journal entries by members of the company and other found text.
My first interview was with Detective Sergeant Ng of the Laramie Police Department. At the start of the interview, he was sitting at his desk, sitting something like this. Now, I was born and raised here. My family is a third generation. My grandparents moved here in the early 1900s. It's basically my daughter makes it a fourth generation. Quite a while. It's a good place to live, good people, lots of space. Now, all the towns in southern Wyoming are laid out in space because of the railroads came through. And it was depending how far they could go before having to refuel and rewater, and Laramie was a major stopping point. Now that's why all the towns are so far spaced apart. We're one of the largest cities in the state, and the least populated.
There's so much space between people and towns here, so much time for reflection. You have an opportunity to be happy in your life here. I found that people here are nicer than in the Midwest where I used to teach because they were happy. They were glad the sun was shining, and it shines a lot here.
What you have your old-time traditional type ranchers. They've been here forever. Laramie's been the hub for where they come and get their supplies and stuff like that.
I love it here. You couldn't put me back there in that mess back east. The best thing about it is the climate. The cold, the wind. They say Wyoming wind will drive a man insane, but it don't bother me. Well, some of the time it bothers me, but most of the time it don't.
And then you got the university population.
I moved here after living in a couple of big cities. I loved it there, but you'd have to be out of your mind to let your kids out after dark. But here in the summertime, I let my kids out till 11 o'clock and I don't think twice about it.
And then you got the people who live in Laramie, basically.
I moved here from rural Texas. Now, in Laramie, if you don't know a person, you'll definitely know someone they know. So it can only be 1 degree removed at most. And for me, I love it. I mean, I love to go to the grocery store because I get to visit with 4 or 5 or 6 people every time I go. And I don't mind people knowing my business because what's my business? I mean, my business is basically good.
I like the trains too. They don't bother me. Well, some of the time they bother me, but most of the time they don't, even though one goes by every 13 minutes out where I live. They used to carry cattle, them trains. Now, all they carry is diapers and cars.
I grew up in Cody, Wyoming. Laramie is better than where I grew up. I'll give it that.
It's a good place to live, good people, lots of space. Now, when the incident happened with that boy, a lot of press people came here, and one of them even followed me out to the crime scene. It was a beautiful day, real gorgeous day, real crisp and clear, and it was that blue that you just can't paint it. It's that sky blue, and the mountains with a little snow in them, and there was this one reporter, lady person that was out there. She said to me,
"Well, who found the boy? Who was out here anyway?"
And I said, well, it's really popular for people to run, and mountain biking is really big out here, and horseback riding, well, it's close to town. And she looked at me and she said,
"Who in the hell would want to run out here?"
And I'm thinking, lady, you're missing the whole point. I mean, all you gotta do is turn around, smell the air, look at the mountains, listen to the birds, and they're nothing but the story. I didn't feel judged. I felt that they were stupid. They're missing the whole point. They're just missing the whole point.
It's hard to talk about Laramie, to tell you what Laramie is for us. If you would have asked me before, I would have said Laramie's a beautiful town, secluded enough where you can have your own identity. A town with a strong sense of community. Everyone knows everyone. A town with a personality that most of the larger cities are stripped of. Now, after Matthew, I would say that Laramie Laramie is a town defined by an accident, a crime. We've become Waco, we've become Jasper. We're a noun, a definition, a sign. We may be able to get rid of that in the future, but it'll sure take a while.
Moises Kaufman saying he had an idea for his next theater project, but there's a feminist to his voice. So I asked what it was all about, and he said he wanted to do a piece about what's happening in Wyoming.
Lee told me that the company was thinking of moving to Laramie to conduct interviews and that they wanted me to come, but I'm hesitant. I have no real interest in prying into a town's unraveling.
I've never done anything like this before in my life. How do I get people to talk to me? What do I ask?
Today, the company has agreed that we should all go to Laramie and interview people. And I'm a bit afraid about taking 10 people in a trip of this nature. Must make some safety rules. Everyone carries cell phones. No one works alone. Have made some preliminary contacts with Rebecca Hilliker, head of the theater department at the University of Wyoming. She's hosting a party for us our first night and has promised to introduce us to possible interviewees.
I must tell you that when I first heard you were thinking of coming here, when you first called me, I wanted to say you've just kicked me in the stomach. Why are you doing this to me? But then I thought, that's stupid. You're not doing this to me. And more importantly, I've thought about it and decided that we've had so much negative closure on this whole thing. And the students really need to talk. When this happened, they started talking, and then the media descended and all the dialogue stopped. You know, I really love my students because they're free thinkers, and you may not like what they have to say, and you may not like their opinions, because they can be very redneck, but they're honest and they're truthful, so there's an excitement here. There's a dynamic between my students that I never had when I was in the Midwest or North Dakota, because there was so much Puritanism that dictated how people looked at the world, that a lot of the times they didn't have an opinion. You couldn't get them to express an opinion. And quite honestly, I'd rather have opinions that I don't like and have that dynamic in education. There's a student I think you should talk to. His name is Jedediah Schultz.
I've lived in Wyoming my whole life. My family's been in Wyoming, well, for generations. Now, when it came time to go to college, my parents couldn't afford to send me there. I want to study theater, and I knew that if I was going to go to college, I would have to get on a scholarship. And so they have this high school competition each year, this Wyoming State High School competition. And I knew that if I didn't take best scene duets, I wouldn't get on the scholarship. And so I went down to the university department of the university looking for good scenes, and I asked one of the professors, I was like, I need a killer scene. And he was like, here you go, this is it. And it was from Angels in America. So I read the scene and knew that I could win best scene if I did a good enough job on it. And when the time came, I told my mom and dad so that they would come to the competition. Now you have to understand, my parents go to everything, every ball game, every hockey game, everything I've ever done. But they brought me into the room and told me that they would not come to see me in the competition because they believed that it was wrong, that homosexuality was wrong. They felt that strongly about it that they didn't want to come see their son do probably the most important thing he'd done in his life up to that point. And I didn't know what to do. I had never, ever gone against my parents' wishes, so I was kind of worried about it. But I decided to do it anyways. And all I can remember from that scene is that when we were done, me and my scene partner, we came up to each other, shook hands, and there was a standing ovation. Man, it was amazing. We took first place and we won. And that's why I can afford to be here at the college, because of that scene. It was one of the best moments of my life. And my parents weren't there. And to this day, it was the one thing my parents didn't see me do. And thinking back on it, I wonder, why'd I do it? Why did I oppose my parents? Because I'm not gay, so why'd I do it? And I guess the only honest answer I can give is, well, I wanted to win. Man, it was such a good scene. It was like the best scene. You know, do you know Mr. Kushner? Maybe you could tell him.
We arrived today in the Denver airport and we drove to Laramie. The moment we crossed the Wyoming border, I swear I saw a herd of buffalo. Also, I thought it was strange the Wyoming sign said, Wyoming, like no place on earth, instead of Wyoming, like no place else on earth.
I stopped by at a local inn for a bite to eat, and my waitress said to me,
Hi, my name is Debbie. I was born in 1954, and everyone was a dick back then, so yes, there's a lot of us around, but I promise I won't slap you if you leave your elbows on the table.
Today the company tried to explain to me to no avail what chicken fried steak was.
Now, are you from Wyoming or are you just passing through?
We're just passing through.
We arrived in Laramie tonight, just past the Welcome to Laramie sign. Population, 26,687. The first thing to greet us was Walmart. In the dark, we could have been on any named rag in America. Fast food chains, gas stations, but as we drove to the downtown area by the railroad tracks, the building still looked like a turn-of-the-century western town. Oh, and when we passed the University Inn, on the sign where amenities like cable TV and heated pool are usually touted, it said, "Hate is not a Laramie value."
I met today with two longtime Laramie residents, Allison Meir and Marge Murray, two social service workers who taught me a thing or two.
Well, what Laramie used to be like when Marge was growing up, well, it was mostly rural.
Oh yeah, it was. I really enjoyed it, you know. All my kids had horses.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was more land. You could keep your pet cow, your horses, your little chickens, you know, just have your little bit of acreage.
Yeah, I could have run around the house in my all-togethers, do the chores while my kids were in school, and nobody could see me. But if they got that close...
Well, then that's their problem.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I got the expression right. In y'all togethers?
Well, yeah, honey, well, we're close.
Now, how's he going to use that in his play?
So this was a big ranching town?
Oh, not just ranching. This was a big railroad town at once before they moved everything down to Cheyenne and Green River and Omaha. Well, now it's just a drive-through spot for the railroad because even, what was it, in the 50s? Well, they had one big roundhouse and they had such a shop, they could build a complete engine.
Yep, my mom worked there.
Mom worked in the roundhouse?
Yep, she washed engines. Her name was Minnie. Oh, we used to sing the song for her. Oh, what's the song? Oh, you know the song.
What song?
Run for the roundhouse, Minnie, they can't catch you there.
But I'll tell you, Wyoming is bad in terms of jobs. I mean, the university has the high whoop-de-whoop jobs. But Wyoming, unless you're the professional, well, the people are working minimum wage jobs.
Yeah, I've either been in the service industry or bartending most of my life. That's how come I know everybody in town.
And she does.
And I do. Now I tell you, here in Laramie, there's a difference and there always has been. And what it is a class distinction. It's between those who are well-educated and ones who are not. And the ones who are well-educated don't understand why the ones who are not don't get themselves educated. Like I was telling you before, my kids had a fight because their mother was a bartender. But never mind, I was the best damn bartender in this whole damn town.
And she was.
That's not bragging, that's just a fact.
But I'll tell you, but here in Laramie, if it weren't for the university, we'd just be at SOL.
What's SOL?
Well, do I have to say it? Well, it's shit out of luck. Oh, Lord, you got that on tape. Where are you getting an education today?
Yeah, I guess I am. So let me just ask you, what was your response when this happened with Matthew Shepard?
Well, I've been close enough to the case to know many of the people. I have a daughter that's on the sheriff's department. As far as the gay issue, I don't give a damn one way or the other as long as they don't bother me. And that is the attitude of most of the Laramie population. They might poke one out. They might, be in a bar situation drinking a little. They might even smack one right across the mouth, but they just walk away. Laramie is live and let live.
I'd say Marge knows a lot more except that she's willing to say, and we have to respect her for that.
Well, where are you going with this story anyhow?
Oh, well, we still haven't decided, but when we're finished, we're going to try to bring around a Laramie.
Okay. There's some things that I'm just not going to tell you.
Today, for the first time, we meet someone who actually knew Matthew Shepard. Trish Steger, owner of Shop in Town, referred to him as Matt.
Matt used to come into my shop. That's how I knew him.
It was the first time I heard him referred to as Matt instead of Matthew. Does he go by Matt to everyone?
Well, on the 2nd of October, I get a phone call about 10 after 7. It was Matthew Shepard. And he says, "Can you pick me up on the corner of 3rd and Grand?" So I pull up to this corner to see who this Matthew Shepard is, and it's this little guy about 5'2", soaking wet, I bet you 97 pounds tops. Now, they said he was 110, but I wouldn't believe it. They also said he was 5'5" in the newspapers, but this man, he was really about 5'2", maybe even 5'1". So he walks up to the window, and I'm gonna go in steps so you can better understand the principle of this man. So he walks up to the window, and I go, "Are you Matthew Shepard?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm Matthew Shepard, but I don't want you to call me Matthew or Mr. Shepard. I don't want you to call me anything. My name is Matt. I'm gay, and we're going to a gay bar. Are you okay with that?" And I said, "How you paying?" The fact is, Laramie doesn't have any gay bars. Matter of fact, neither does Wyoming. So he was paying me to take him down to Fort Collins, Colorado, about an hour away. Now, Matt, he was a blunt little shit, you see what I'm saying? You know, he was straightforward, and I like that about him. Maybe gay, but straightforward. You get what I'm saying?
I don't know, you know. How does anyone ever tell about another? You should really talk to my sister Romaine. She was a really good friend of Matthew's.
We never called him Matthew, actually. Most of the time, we called him Choo Choo, you know, because we used to call him Matthew, and then we just called him Choo Choo. And whenever I think of Matthew, I think of his incredible beaming smile. I mean, he'd walk in and he'd be like, you know, and he'd smile at everyone, and he just made you feel great. And he would like stare people down in the coffee shop so that he could sit on the end seat so that he can talk to me while I was working. And if someone was sitting in that seat, he'd sit there and he'd stare at them until they left, and then he would claim a spot. But Matthew definitely had a political side to him. I mean, that's all his big interest was watching CNN and MSNBC. He was like really smart in like political affairs, but not too smart on like common sense things. So he moves to Laramie to go to school.
Matthew was very shy when he first came in, to the point of being somewhat mousy, I'd almost say. He was having some difficulties adjusting, but this was home for him, and he made that quite clear. So that mousiness, that shyness, gave way to a person who was excited about this track that they're going to embark on. He was just figuring out wanting to work on human rights and how he was going to do that. And when that happens to a person, they begin to bloom a little bit. He was starting to say, there are things I can do here. There are opportunities here. I can be important.
I had just heard from Matthew about 48 hours before his attack, and he told me he had just joined the gay and lesbian group on campus, and he said he was enjoying it, and he was getting ready for Pride Week and whatnot. I mean, he was totally stoked about school. Yeah, he was really excited about being there.
And in retrospect, and I can only say this in retrospect, of course, I think that's where he's heading, towards human rights, which only adds to the irony and tragedy of this.
Let me tell you something else here. Now, there is more gay people in Wyoming than what meets the eye. And I know for a fact, they're not particularly, what do you call them, the queens, the gay people, you know, the queens, the run-around faggot type people, you know. They're the ones that throw bale, hay, jump on horses, brand them, and kick ass. I mean, as I always say, don't fuck with a Wyoming queer, because they will kick you in your fucking ass. But, I mean, that's not the point of what I'm trying to say. There's more gay people in Wyoming than what meets the eye. I mean, I know a lot of people in general. I lived up here some 40-odd years now. And I mean, that's just the point of what I'm trying to say. People in Laramie don't give a damn one way or another. If you're gay, straight, I mean, that's just the point. I mean, think about it. If there's 8 men and 1 woman in a Wyoming bar, which it's often the case, I mean, you stop and think, who is getting what? Now, it don't take a big intelligent mind to figure that one out.
My understanding when I first came here is that I was the first out lesbian or gay faculty member on campus, and that was in 1992, so that wasn't that long ago. I was asked at my interview what my husband did, and so I came out then. Do you want a funny story? When you first get here as a new faculty member, there's all these things you have to do. And so I was in my office, and I noticed that this woman had called, and I was expecting, you know, it was a health insurance phone call, something like that. And so I called her back, and
I could hear her. She's working at her keyboard, clicking away, and I said, you know, "This is Kathy Conley returning your phone call." And she said, "Oh, it's you." And I thought, this is bizarre. And she said, I hear you're gay. I hear you are." And I'm like, mm-hmm. And she said, "I hear you came here as a couple. I'm one too, not a couple, just a person." And so she was kind of lesbian who knew I was coming, and she wanted to come and meet me immediately. And she later told me that there were other lesbians that she knew who wouldn't be seen with me, that I would irreparably taint them, that just to be seen with me could be a problem.
When I first came here, I knew it was going to be hard as a gay man, but I kept telling myself people should live where they want to live, and there would be times I would go down to Denver and I'd go to gay bars, and I meet so many men down there from Laramie, so many gay men, and they'd say, "I couldn't live there. I mean, how could you live there? I had to get out." Ugh. But every once in a while, there would be a guy. Oh gosh, I really miss Laramie. I mean, I really love it there. That's where I want to be. And they'd get this starry-eyed look, and I mean, if that's where you want to live, I mean, do it. I mean, imagine if more gay men stayed in small towns. But it's easier said than done, of course.
Today we were moving from our motel and heading for the Best Western. My hope is that it's a better Western.
Today we divide Western with different churches in the community. One of them I was in the Baptist church. We were welcoming to the services by the Reverend himself, standing at the entrance to the chapel. This is what I remember of the sermon in the morning.
I have a simple truth that I often tell to my colleagues, and I will be telling it to you today. The word is either sufficient or it is not. Scientists say that the world, well, human history, is only 5 to 6 billion years old. I mean, what's a billion years, give or take? But the Bible tells me that human history is only 6,000 years old. The word is either sufficient or it is not.
Sociology of religion in the West. Dominant religious traditions in this town, Baptist, Mormon, they're everywhere. It's not just Salt Lake, you know? They're all over. They're like jam on toast down there.
The Mormon Church has a little different thing going on that irritates some folks. And that is, we absolutely believe that God still speaks to man. We don't think that it happened and some folks wrote it in the Bible. God speaks to us today, and we believe that. We believe that the prophet of the church has the authority to receive inspiration and revelation from God.
So the spectrum would be, on the left side of the panel, so far left that I'm probably sitting by myself, is me and the Unitarian Church. Unitarians are by and large humanists, many of whom are atheists. I mean, we're not even sure we're a religion. And to the right of the spectrum, to his credit, Father Roger, Catholic priest who was well established here. He did not equivocate at all when this happened. He hosted the vigil for Matthew that night.
I was really jolted because, when we did the vigil, we wanted to get other ministers involved. And so we called some of them and they weren't gonna get involved. It was like, we're gonna stand back and see which way the wind is blowing. And that angered me immensely. We're supposed to stand out as leaders. I thought, wow, what's going on here?
God has set boundaries, and one of our responsibilities is to learn. What is it that God wants? So you study your scripture, you look to your leaders. Then you know what the bounds are. Now, once you kind of get a feel for what the bounds are, then you sort of get a feel for what's out of bounds. There's a proclamation on the family. Family is defined as one man, one woman, and children. That is a family. That's about as clear as you can state it. There's no sexual deviation in the Mormon Church, no leniency. We just think it's out of bounds.
I warn you, you will be mocked. You will be ridiculed by the singularity of your faith. But let the Bible be your guide. It's in there. It's all in there.
The Christian pastors, many of the conservative ones, were silent on this. Conservative Christians use the Bible to show the rest of the world it says here in the Bible. And most Americans believe, and they do, that the Bible is the Word of God. And how are you going to fight that?
I am a biblicist, which means the Bible doesn't need me to be true. The Bible is true whether I believe it or not. The Word is either sufficient or it is not.
I arrived in Laramie on September 15th. I looked around, tumbleweed, cement factories, and said, what the hell am I doing in Wyoming? 3 weeks later, I found out what the hell I'm doing in Wyoming.
I've lived in Laramie since I was 4, yeah? My parents are from Bangladesh. 2 years ago, because I'm Muslim, I decided to start wearing a scarf. And that's really changed my life here in Laramie, yeah? Like, people say things to me like, why do you have to go and wear that thing on your head? Like, when I go to the grocery store, I'm not looking to give people Islam 101, you know what I mean? And so I'll be like, well, it's part of my religion. And they'll be like, and this is the worst part, because they'll be like, I know it's part of your religion, but why? And it's like, how do you expect me to go into the whole doctrine of physical modesty in my own spiritual relationship with the Lord, standing there with my pop and chips? You know what I mean? You know, it's so unreal to me that a group from New York would be writing a play about Laramie, you know? And it's like, I was thinking about it, and it's like, you're gonna be in a play about my town. You're gonna be on stage in New York pretending like you're us. That's so weird.
Hello? Yes, hello? My name is Amanda Gronich, and I'm here in Laramie working with a theater company. I went to the Reverend's, your husband's church, on Sunday, and I was extremely interested in speaking with the Reverend about some of his recent thoughts about recent events.
Well, I don't think he'll want to talk to you. He has very biblical views about homosexuality. He doesn't condone that kind of violence, but he doesn't condone that kind of lifestyle. You know what I mean? And he's just been bombarded with press after this happened, and the media's just been terrible about this whole thing.
Oh, I know. I really understand. It must have just been terrible.
Oh, yes. I think we're all hoping this just goes away.
Well, do you think I can call back and speak with your husband just briefly?
Well, all right. You can call us back tonight at 9 o'clock.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll do that.
Today, Barbara and I went to the Fireside Bar, which is the last place Matthew's seen in public.
The Fireside. Definitely feels like a college bar with a couple of pool tables and a stage area for karaoke night. Still, the few regulars in the late afternoon were hardly the college crowd.
First person we talked to was Matt Mickelson, the owner. My great-great-grandfather moved here in 1862. He owned Laramie's first opera house. It was called the Old Blue Front. In 1870, Louisa Grandma Swain cast the first woman's ballot in any free election in the world. That's why Wyoming is the equality state. So what I want to do is reestablish my bar's business as the Old Blue Front Opera House and Good Time Emporium. You know, I want to have a restaurant, I want to have a gift shop, I want to have a pool hall and do all this shit, you know? And every night's ladies' night. And so the Fireside is the first step towards the Old Blue Front Opera House and Good Time Emporium.
So, what about the night Matthew Shepard was here?
We had karaoke that night, and 30 people here. Matthew Shepard came in, sitting right where you are, just hanging out. I mean, if you want to talk to someone, you should talk to Matt Galloway. He was the kid that was bartending that night. You'd have to meet him. His character stands for itself. Hey, is Galloway working tonight?
Now, I'm gonna make this brief, quick, get it over with, but it'll be everything. Just the facts, you know? So, I clock in, usual time, Tuesday nights, 10:30. Now, Matthew Shepard shows up and sits down alone and orders a Heineken.
I like to drink Heineken. And nothing else. Heineken, even though you have to pay $95 for a six-pack. He'd always buy the same beer.
So, what can I tell you about Matt? I mean, if you had 100 customers like him, it would be the most perfect bar I've ever been in, and that has nothing to do with sexual orientation. I mean, just absolute mannerisms, you know? Manners, politeness, intelligence, taking care of me, that as in tips. You know, just everything clean cut, dress nice, good conversations. I mean, some people come in, you know, please, thank you, offers intellect, you know, within their vocabulary. I mean, he was just sitting there, enjoying his beer and, you know, the company around, not looking for anyone or anything. Now, approximately 11:45, 11:30, 11:45, Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson show up, and I mean, they come in just very stone-faced, you know, just dirty, grungy, rude, you know, gimme, that type of thing. So they come up and they order a beer and they pay for it in dimes and quarters, and I mean, come on, you don't forget that. $5.50 in dimes and quarters, now that is a freaking nightmare. Now, Henderson and McKinney, they didn't seem intoxicated at all. I mean, they came up to the bar, they ordered a beer, and they took the pitcher back there into the pool room. And, I mean, maybe a half hour later, they were up and they were walking around, and they had no beer. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not going to ask them if they want another one, because obviously they just paid for a pitcher in dimes and quarters, and I have a really good feeling they did not have any more money.
Money meant nothing to Matthew because he came from a lot of it, and he would like hand over his wallet in 2 seconds because money meant nothing. His shoes might have meant something. They say it was robbery, but I don't buy it for even an Iowa of a second.
And a few moments later, I look up and Aaron and Russell are talking to Matthew Shepard.
Aaron had said that a guy walked up to him and said that he was gay and wanted to get with Aaron and Russ, and that he got aggravated with it and said that he was straight and didn't want anything to do with him and walked off. He said that is until he and Russell decided to go to the bathroom and pretend that they were gay to get him in the truck and rob him.
Okay, no. They say that Matt approached them. I absolutely, positively disbelieve and refute that statement 100%. And I'm gonna give you 2 reasons why. 1, character reference. Why would he approach them? Why them? He wasn't coming on to anyone else in the bar. They say he's gay, he's a flaming gay, he's gonna come on to people. Bullshit! You know, he didn't come on to me, hello, and he came on to them. I don't believe it. 2, territorialism is the word I would use for this, and that's the fact that Matt had been seen at the bar all night. Aaron and Russell, they were in the pool area. Upon their first interaction, Aaron and Russell were in Matt's area. The area Matt had been seen all night. Now, who approached who by that?
Matthew was the kind of person, like, he would never not talk to someone for any reason. If someone started talking to him, he'd just be like, oh, blah, blah, blah. He never had a problem just striking up a conversation with anybody.
Matt did feel lonely a lot of times, and me knowing that and knowing how gullible he could be, he would have walked right into it. And the fact that he was at the bar alone without any friends made him that much more vulnerable.
Now, the only thing I'm gonna say, and this is what I'm gonna testify because I'm also basically the key eyewitness in this case. What I'm gonna say is, I saw Matthew leave. I saw 2 individuals leave with Matthew. Now, I didn't see their faces, but I saw the back of their heads. At the same time, Russell and Aaron were no longer around. You do the math.
Actually, I think the DJ was the last one to see him out. Gave him a cigarette or something. His name's Shadow.
I was the last person that talked to Matt before he left the fireside. I was just bullshitting around with my shit, and he stopped me. No, actually, I stopped him. He's like, "Hey, Shadow, da-da-da-da." And I was like, "What, man, you getting ready to leave?" And he's like, "Yeah, man," and this and that. But then I noticed them two guys that stood outside. You could see it. You could see it. And they stood there, you know, looking at Matt and Matt looking back. And I talked to Matt for like a good, 10 minutes. And they were standing there, like anxious to leave and shit. And I saw them leave. I seen it. They went in a black truck, a small black truck. The three of them sat in the front and Matt in the middle. And I didn't think anything of it, I didn't think them guys were gonna be like that.
I knew Aaron a long time. Aaron was a good kid. I liked Aaron a lot. That's why I was shocked when I heard this. I mean, I knew he was. He was living out far. In his trailer is what he told me. Him and his girl. They just started dating last summer, and they must have gotten pregnant as soon as they started dating. Cause he had a kid. He was only 21 years old, and he was running around with a kid. Now, that's just the kind of person Aaron was. Just like how he was always wearing big clothes, like Tommy Hilfiger, Polo, Gucci. At the time I knew him, he was just a young kid. Trying to, he just wanted to fit in, acting tough, acting cool, But you could get up in his face about it, and he would back down, like he was some sort of scared kid.
Russell was so sweet. I mean, he was the Eagle Scout. His whole presence was just quiet and sweet. So, of course, this doesn't make any sense to me. And I know people snap or whatever, but it wasn't a real intimate relationship. I was just his landlord. I did work with him at the Chuck Wagon too, and I remember, at the Christmas party, he was totally drunk, out of his mind. And we pretty much was just party time, He wasn't belligerent. He didn't change. His personality didn't change. He was still the same little meek Russell. And I even remember him coming up to me and saying, "Sherry, when you get a chance, can I have this dance?" Which we never did get around to doing. But now, I just want to shake him, What were you thinking? What in the hell were you thinking?
The fence. I've been out there several times. I've taken visitors. The place has become a pilgrimage site. And clearly it's a very powerful personal experience to go out there. So stark, so narrow. And you can't help but think of Matthew lying out there for 18 hours straight in nearly freezing temperatures. And the God, my God, why have you forsaken me comes to mind.
Phil Livery, Brendan Matthews took us to the fence this morning. I feel such a strong kinship with this young man. I broke down the minute I touched it. On the way home, I made sure that no one saw me crying.
Greg was crying on the way back. I couldn't bring myself to tears, but I felt the same way. I have an interview later this afternoon with Aaron Kreefels. He's the boy who found Matthew out on the fence. I don't think I'm up for it. I'll see if someone else can do it.
Well, I took off on my bicycle around 5:00 p.m. on Wednesday from my dorm. I kind of just felt like going for a ride. So I went to the top of Cactus Canyon, and I'm not super familiar with the area, so when I came back down, I didn't know where I was going, which kind of makes me think that God wanted me to find him, because there was no way I was going to go that way. So I was in some deep-ass sand, and I wanted to turn around, but for some reason, I just kept going. And there was this rock on the ground, and I just drilled right into it, over handlebars, and went to the ground. So I got back up, dusted myself off, I looked around, and I noticed something, which ended up to be Matt tied to a fence. I thought it was a scarecrow. I was like, Halloween's coming up. Thought it was some sort of Halloween gag, so I didn't think much of it. So I grabbed my bike, walked around the fence. It was a buck-type fence. And when I got close to him, I noticed something. I noticed his hair. And that was a major key to me. Noticing it was a human being was his hair. Because I thought it was a dummy. Seriously, I thought it was a dummy. I saw his chest going up and down and up and down. I thought it was some kind of mechanism. But when I saw hair, I knew it was a human being. So I ran to the nearest house. I ran as fast as I could, and I called the police.
I responded to the call. When I got there, at first, the only thing I could see was partially somebody's feet, and I got out of my vehicle and I raced over. I seen what appeared to be a young man, 13, 14 years old, because he was so tiny, laying on the ground, and he was tied to the bottom of a pole. I did the best I could. The gentleman that was laying on the ground, Matthew Shepard, he was covered in dry blood all over his head. There was dry blood underneath him, and he was barely breathing. He was doing the best he could. I was going to breathe for him, but I couldn't get his mouth open. His mouth wouldn't open for me. He was covered in, like I said, partially dry blood and blood all over his head. The only place he did not appear to have any blood on him, on his face, was where he appeared to have been crying down his face. His head was distorted, it did not look normal. It appeared as if he had a real harsh head wound.
I was working the emergency room the night Matthew Shepard was brought in. I don't think that any of us have seen a patient in this condition in a long time. Those of us who've worked in big city hospitals have seen this, but we have some people here who've not worked in big city hospitals, and it's not something you expect here. You expect to see it. You expect to see these injuries from car crash, rolling down a hill at 80 miles an hour. You expect to see gross injuries from something like this, but you don't expect to see this from someone doing this to another person. The ambulance report said it was a beating, so we knew. There was nothing I could do. I mean, if there was anything I could have done to help him, I would have done it, but there was nothing. And I was screaming at the top of my lungs, trying to get something out of him, like, hello, wake up, hello. But he didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't anything.
He was tied to the fence. His hands were thumbs out in what we call cuffing position, the way we handcuff people. He was tied with a real thin white rope, went around the bottom of the pole about 4 inches off the ground. His shoes were missing. He was tied extremely tight, so I used my boot knife and I tried to slip it between the rope and his wrist. I had to be extremely careful not to harm Matthew any further.
Your first thought is, well, certainly you'd like to think that it's someone from out of town that comes through and beats somebody. I mean, things like this happen, shit happens. And it happens in Laramie. But if there's been someone who's been beaten repeatedly, certainly this is something that offends us. I think that's a good word. It offends us.
He was tied so tight. Finally, I got my knife through there. I'm sorry. We rolled him over to his left side. When we did that, he quit breathing. Immediately, I put him back on his back, and that was just enough of an adjustment. It gave me enough room to cut him free there. I seen the EMS unit trying to get to the location. Once it got there, we put a neck collar on him, placed him on a backboard, and then Rob drove the ambulance to Ivinson's Hospital's emergency room.
Now, the strange thing is, 20 minutes before Matthew came in, Aaron McKinney was brought in by his girlfriend. Now, I'd guess he had just gotten into a fight later on that evening back in town, so I'm working on Aaron, and the ambulance comes in with Matthew. Now, at this point, I don't know that there's connection at all. So I tell Aaron to go and wait, and I go treat Matthew. So there's Aaron in one room of the ER, there's Matthew 2 doors down. Now, as soon as we saw Matthew, we knew he was beyond our capabilities. Called a neurosurgeon at Poudre Valley, and he was on the road an hour and 50 minutes, I think.
They showed me a picture. Days later, I saw a picture of Matthew. I would have never recognized him.
Then 2 days later, I found out the connection, and I was very struck. There were 2 kids. They were both my patients, and they were 2 kids. I took care of both of them, of both their bodies. And for a brief moment, I wonder if this is how God feels when he looks down on us. How are all his kids? Our bodies, our souls? And I felt a great deal of compassion for both of them.
The news reports start trickling out on Thursday, but no names are mentioned, and the brutality of the crime was not mentioned. All that was mentioned was that there was a man, Laramie man, found beaten outside of the prairie, basically. Later on in the evening, they mentioned his name, and it was like, that's not my student. That's not Matthew Shepard. That's not this person I've been meeting with.
I was in the coffee shop and someone pulled me aside and said, I don't know much, but they say there's been a young man who's been beaten in Laramie, and they say his name is Matthew Shepard. And he said, do you think this could be our Matthew? I said, well, yeah, it sounds like it could be our Matthew. So I called up my sister Trish and I said, tell me what you know. I'm just like, I need to know anything you know because I don't know anything.
So I was talking to my sister on the phone, and the whole story just came up on Channel 5 News. It was just like ba-boom.
And the news reports kept rolling in. Young University of Wyoming student, his age, his description, it's like, oh my God.
And I just felt sick to my stomach. Just instantly sick to my stomach. And I had to tell Romaine, yes, it was Matthew. Yes, it was your friend.
Well, I'll tell you what's overwhelming. I first find out about it Friday morning. I go to class, walk out, and boom, there it is in the branding iron. So I immediately drive to the nearest newsstand, buy a Laramie Boomerang because I want more details. Buy that, go home, and before I can even open the newspaper, my boss calls me and he says,
Did you hear what happened?
I say, yeah.
Was he in the bar Tuesday night?
I go, yes. Yes, he was.
You've got to get down to the bar right now. We've got to talk about this. We've got to discuss what's going to go on.
By this time, I was starting to get upset. But still, the severity wasn't out yet.
It was a Thursday afternoon. I got a call. Oh, we just got a kid in from Wyoming, and it looks like he might be the victim of a hate crime. We've got some newspaper reporters here asking questions. And so we agreed that we needed one spokesperson. As CEO, I'll do that, and we'll try and gather as much information as we can.
And then I watched the 10 o'clock news that night where they started speaking of the nature and the seriousness of it.
So I'm on the phone with Mickelson and he's like,
We need to go to the arraignment so we can identify these guys and make sure that these guys were in the bar.
So we go to the arraignment.
Today our focus turns to Laramie, Wyoming in the Albany County Courthouse, where Aaron James McKinney and Russell Arthur Henderson are being charged with the brutal beating of Matthew Shepard, a gay student at the University of Wyoming.
The arraignment was on Friday, right around lunchtime, and I said, I'm just going, and I took off. It's just down the street. So I walked a couple of blocks and then I went. Has anyone told you about the arraignment? There was probably about 100 people from town and probably as many news media by that point. A lot more of the details had come out. The fact that the perpetrators were kids themselves, local kids who everyone who's from around here has some sort of relationship to, and everyone was, I think, waiting on pins and needles for what would happen when the perpetrators walked in. And what happened? There's probably 200 people in the room at this point. They walked in their complete orange jumpsuits and their shackles, and you could have heard a pin drop. It was incredibly solemn. I mean, lots of people were teary at that point. Then the judge came in and did a reading, and it was a reading of the facts that the prosecution held, and it was a statement of the facts, and the reading of the facts was,
the essential facts are that the defendants, Aaron James McKinney and Russell Arthur Henderson, met Matthew Shepard at the Fireside Bar. After Mr. Shepard confided he was gay, both subjects deceived Mr. Shepard into leaving with them in their vehicle to a remote area. Upon arrival at said area, both defendants tied Mr. Shepard to a buck fence, beat him, robbed him, and tortured him. The subjects were later contacted by officers of the Laramie Police Department, who observed inside the cab of their pickup a pair of black patent leather shoes belonging to the victim, Matthew Shepard. The subjects also took a wallet containing $20, a credit card, a pair of shoes, and obtained Mr. Shepard's address to later burglarize his home.
I don't think that there was a single person who left that courtroom who wasn't crying at the end of it. I mean, it lasted 5 minutes, but it kept on getting more and more horrific, ending with...
Said defendants left the victim begging for his life.
How could this happen? I think a lot of people just don't understand. And even I don't really understand how someone could do something like this. We have one of the most vocal populations of gay people in the state. And it's pretty much live and let live.
My secret hope was that they were from somewhere else. Then of course you can create that distance. We don't grow children like that here. Well, it's pretty obvious that we do grow children like that here.
So that was the arraignment, and my response was pretty catatonic. You know, not sleeping, not eating. Don't leave me alone right now.
More and more details came out about the sheer brutality, motivations, how this happened. And then, quite frankly, the media descended, and there was no time to reflect on anymore.
Laramie, Wyoming, often known as the Gem City of the Plains, is in the eye of the storm. The cowboy state has its rednecks and yahoos for sure, but there's no more bigots per capita in Wyoming than in New York, Florida, or California. The difference is, in Wyoming, it's a lot harder to blend in if you're anything other than prairie stock.
Aaron McKinney and his friend Russell Henderson both came from the poor side of town. Both from broken homes and as teenagers had run-ins with the law. They live in trailer parks and scratch out a living by working at fast food restaurants and fixing roofs.
A gay college student lay hospitalized in critical condition after a severe beating. This small city that calls itself Wyoming's hometown is wrestling with an attitude against gay men.
People like to think that what happened to Matthew Shepard was an exception to the rule, but this is an extreme version of what happens in our schools on a daily basis.
It's a tough business here in Laramie, as Matthew Shepard knew, and as his friends know, to be gay in cowboy country.
It was huge. Yeah, it was herds, and we're talking hundreds of reporters, which makes a huge dent in the town's population. There was news trucks everywhere, news reporters everywhere on campus, and we're not used to that type of attention. We're not used to that type of exposure.
These people are predators. Like, this one journalist actually caught one of the judges in the bathroom at the urinal and was like asking him questions. And the judge was like, "Excuse me, can I have some privacy?" And the journalist was like offended that he asked for privacy. I mean, this is not how journalism started. Like the Gutenberg Press, you know?
I'll tell you what, when Hard Copy came and taped me, I taped them at the exact same time. I have every word I ever said on tape. So if they try to do anything funny, they better watch their fucking ass.
I am outraged and sickened by the heinous crime committed against Matthew Shepard. I would like to extend my most heartfelt sympathies to the family.
Governor, you've never pushed any hate legislation crimes in the past.
I would like to urge the people of Wyoming against overreacting in a way that gives one group special rights over others. We will wait and see if the vicious crime committed against Matthew Shepard was motivated by hate.
You've got the beginning of the news story, and you've got the graphics in the background, and they've got murder in Wyoming, and it's got red dripping from it, like it's got blood coming from it or something. And I'm like, what
What is this? This is sensationalism. And we're here going, wait a minute, we had the guys in jail in less than a day. I think that's pretty damn good.
And for us to be more or less maligned. That we are not a good community, but we are, well, the majority of people here are good people.
You get bad apples sometimes. And I think that the gay community took this as an advantage. Said, it's a good time for us to exploit this.
Had this been a heterosexual these boys decided to take out and rob, this would have never made national news. Now my son is guilty before he's even had a trial.
Look, I do think that the media actually made people accountable because they made people think. Because people were sitting in their homes, watching TV, listening to CNN, and watching Dan Rathers and going, Jesus Christ, well, that's not how it is here. Well, how is it here?
Well, by this point, I looked out their tour that had been 2 or 3 reporters. There must have been 10 or 15 still photographers, another 20 or 30 reporters, and 10 video cameras. The parents had just arrived, and I had barely gotten a chance to introduce myself. I looked out there, and I thought, my gosh, what am I gonna do? Matthew Shepard was admitted in critical condition at approximately 9:15 p.m. October 9th. When he arrived, he was unresponsive and breathing support was being provided. Matthew's major injuries consisted of hyperthermia as well as a fracture from behind his head to just in front of the right ear. He also has several lacerations on his head, face, and neck. Matthew's temperature has fluctuated over the past 24 hours, ranging from 98 to 106 degrees. We have had difficulty controlling his temperature. Matthew's parents arrived at approximately 7 p.m. October 9th, and the following is a statement from them. First of all, we'd like to thank the American public for their kind thoughts about Matthew and their fond wishes for a speedy recovery. We appreciate your prayers and goodwill, and we know that there is something Matthew would appreciate too. The following, we also have a special request for the members of the media. Matthew is very much in need of his family at this time, and so we ask that you respect our privacy as well as Matthew's, so that we can concentrate all of our efforts, thoughts, and love on our son. Thank you very much.
One of the things that happened when I got to the fence, it was such an overwhelming amount of blood, and we try and wear protective gloves, but we had this really cheap sheriff at the time, and he bought us these shit gloves. So, you know, you put them on and you put them on, and they keep breaking, so eventually you just ran out of gloves, you know? So you think, okay, don't hesitate. You know, that's what your mind tells you all the time, don't hesitate. So you keep moving and you try and help Matthew and you try and find an airway, and that's just what you do, you know?
Like I was telling you before, Reggie's my daughter. And when she told me she wanted to be a police officer, well, I thought there was no better job for her.
Probably a day later, the doctor called and told me that Matthew had HIV. And he said, you've been exposed and you've had a bad exposure. Because you see, I'd been building a lean for my llamas and I had a bunch of open cuts on my hands, so I was kind of screwed, you know? And so you think, oh shoot, you know?
Would you like to talk about losing sleep?
So I said to the doctor, I said, okay, what do I do? And he said, get up here. So I got up there and we started ATZ drugs immediately.
And the doctor told us that if the medicine was administered 36 hours after the exposure, then it could stop you from getting the disease.
That is a mean, nasty medicine. Mean. I've lost 10 pounds and a lot of my hair. Yeah.
Quite frankly, I just want to lash out on somebody. Not at Matthew. Please understand, none of us are mad at Matthew. Maybe we just wanted to just squeeze McKinney's head off, and I think about Henderson too, and just 2 absolute human beings just ruining people's lives. And it's been really hard for my family, especially for her and her kids.
I think it brought home to my girls what their mom does for a living.
Reggie, you know what I'm gonna tell you now?
And my parents. They both said the same goddamn thing.
You're quitting this damn job!
And it's a parent thing, you know, because they're terribly proud of you, whether you're handling a drunk or you're handling a case like this, but they don't want you getting hurt.
Like I said before, there's a right way, there's a wrong way, and then there's a Reggie's way.
So I said, oh, for God's sake, lighten up, Francis.
Oh, you are so stubborn!
They say I'm stubborn and I don't believe them. I just think, okay, I've heard your opinion, now here's mine. I'm 39 years old. What are they gonna do, spank me?
No, Reggie, don't give me any ideas now.
They look pretty funny, you know, what can they say?
I just hope she doesn't go before me. I just couldn't handle that.
So, this is a person who sent me an email after they read my speech on the Denver Post story, and they said,
You and the straight people of Laramie and Wyoming are guilty of the beating of Matthew Shepard, just as the Germans who looked the other way are guilty of the deaths of the Jews, the Gypsies, and the homosexuals. You have taught your straight children to hate their gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. Unless and until you acknowledge the fact that Matthew's beating was not just some random occurrence, that it wasn't just the work of a couple of random crazies, you have Matthew's blood on your hands.
and I just can't tell you what that does to you. And it's like, you can't possibly know what I'm thinking. You can't possibly know what this has done to me and my family and my community.
That first week alone, vigils for Matthew Shepard were held in Laramie, Denver, Fort Collins, and Colorado Springs. Soon after, in Detroit, Chicago, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Nashville, Minneapolis, and Portland, Maine, among others. In Los Angeles, 5,000 people gathered. And in New York City, a political rally ended in civil disobedience and hundreds of arrests. And the Poudre Valley Hospital website received close to 1 million visitors from across the country and around the world, all expressing hope for Matthew's recovery.
As of 9 a.m. today, Matthew Shepard remains in critical condition. The family continues to emphasize that the members of the media respect their privacy. The family also wants to thank the American public for their kind thoughts and concern for Matthew.
There are certain things when I sit in church, and the Reverend will tell you flat out that he doesn't agree with homosexuality. And I don't know, I think right now I'm going through changes, and I'm still learning about myself, and I just don't feel like I can make a decision that says homosexuality is right. And when you've been raised your whole life that it's wrong, and I mean, yeah, I wouldn't agree with it. Well, yeah, I wouldn't agree with it, but maybe that's just because I couldn't do it. And speaking in religious terms, I just don't think that's how God intended it to happen. And, but I don't hate homosexuals, and I mean, I won't persecute them or anything like that at all. But that's not going to be getting in the way of me and the other person at all.
Well, it's preached in schools that being gay is okay and yada, yada, yada. But if my kids ask me, I'd set them down and I'd tell them, this is the life. This is the lifestyle. This is what gay people do. This is what animals do, okay? And I tell them, this is why I believe it's wrong.
There's more gay people around than what you think. It doesn't bother anybody because most of them that are gay or lesbian, they know damn well who to talk to. You don't pick up regular people. I'm not excusing their actions, but it's making me feeling better knowing it was partially Matthew Shepard's fault and partially the guys who did it. You know, maybe it's 50-50.
Yes, as a lesbian, I was more concerned for my safety. I think we all were. And I think it's because we all know it can happen to us anytime. I mean, you know, I'd be afraid to walk down the street and display any sort of physical affection for my partner. You don't do that here in Laramie.
Well, there's this whole idea. You leave me alone, I leave you alone. And it's even in some Western literature, you know, live and let live. And I'm like,
that is such crap, you know? I mean, I tell my friends that, even my gay friends bring it up sometimes, and they're like, that is such crap. And I mean, basically what it boils down to is if I don't tell you I'm a fag, you won't beat the crap out of me. What's so great about that? That's a great philosophy?
We went to the candle vigil, and it was so good to be with people who felt like shit. I remember thinking, I don't deserve to feel this bad, you know? And someone got up there and said, they said, hello, hey, I'm saying it wrong, but basically, they said, come on guys, let's show the world that Laramie's not this kind of town. But it is this kind of town. If it wasn't this kind of town, how could something like this happen here? Like that's a lie, because it literally happened here. So how is this not the type of place where something like this happens? It's like looking at an Escher painting and getting all confused. Like it's totally circular logic. Like how can you say that? And we need to mourn this. We need to be sad that we live in a town, a state, a country where shit like this happens. I mean, there are people trying to distance themselves from this crime. And we need to own this, I feel. We all need to own it. We are like this. We are like this. We are like this.
I was at the Fireside Bar one afternoon and I ran into two friends of Erin McKinney, Shannon and Jen. You knew Erin well, right?
Yeah, we both did. When I first found out, I thought it was really, really awful. And I don't know whether Erin was fucked up or whether he was coming down or what, but Matthew had money. Shit, he had better clothes than I did. Matthew was a little rich bitch.
You shouldn't call him a rich bitch, though. That's not right.
Well, I'm not saying he's a bad guy or anything. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time and said the wrong things. And I'm not going to lie to you. There was some times when I was messed up on meth and I thought about going out and robbing. I mean, I never did it. It was there. It's easy money.
Erin's done this kind of thing before. I mean, they both have. One night, they went down to Cheyenne and came back with like $300. I don't know if they had gay people as their particular targets or anything, but anyone who looked rich or easy to overpower was fair game.
Do you think that there was any homophobia at all involved in this that contributed to some of it?
Probably. It probably would have pissed Erin off that Matthew was gay. He didn't interact well with the gay people that we knew, but as long as they didn't hit on him, as long as it didn't come up.
As long as they weren't doing it in front of him.
Do you get the impression that he knew other gay people?
I'm sure that he knew people that were gay. I mean, he worked up at the KFC and there were a couple people that were, yeah. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing or anything. I mean, half the people I know here in Laramie are gay.
What would you guys say to Erin right now if you saw him?
First off, I'd ask if he'd do any more tweak.
If I saw Erin right now, I'd be like, man, why'd you fuck up like that? But I want to make sure he's doing good in there, you know? He probably is. Probably just want to hang out with him.
Smoke a bowl with him.
I bet he wants one so bad.
You guys both went to Laramie High?
Yeah, can't you tell? We're a product of our society. On a day that is traditionally given over to nothing more profound than a collegiate exuberance in the fortune of the University of Wyoming football team, this community on the High Plains had a different kind of homecoming Saturday. As many searched their souls in the wake of a vicious, apparent anti-gay hate crime.
This was homecoming weekend. There are a lot of people in town, and there was a homecoming parade scheduled for it. And the students organized a tag on the back of it, you know, behind the banner supporting Matt. And everyone wearing the armbands the students had created.
I live in the center of town. And in my apartment, I have two windows going opposite, one going to the north and one to the south. And that was the homecoming parade route. Now, on this day, I had a cast on my leg because of a fall. So I was very disappointed because I wanted to walk with the people walking for Matthew. So I watched from my window, and it just was. I'm 52 years old and I'm gay. I've lived here for many years and I've seen a lot. I was very moved when I saw the banner for Matthew. About 100 people were walking behind the banner. So when the parade came down the block to go take a U-turn, I went to the other side of my apartment to go see it come south down the other street.
I was right up front where they were holding the banner for Matthew, and let me tell you, it was incredible. A mass of people, families, mothers tying these armbands around their 6-year-old kids. Mothers explaining to their 6-year-old kids why they should wear these armbands. I mean, it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever done in my entire life.
So about 10 minutes goes by, and sure enough, the parade starts coming down. And then I noticed the most incredible thing. The amount of people walking for Matthew had grown 5 times. There was at least 500 people walking for Matthew Shepard. 500 people, can you imagine? And people just kept on joining in. And you know what? Tears were streaming down my face. I started to cry. And then I thought, thank God I got to see this in my lifetime. And then my second thought was, thank you, Matthew.
This is one of our last days on our second trip to Laramie. Greg and I have been conducting interviews non-stop, and we are exhausted.
We are to meet Father Roger at 7:30. I was wishing we could just skip it all together, but we gotta follow through. So here we go, 7:30 a.m. 2 clears and a Catholic priest.
Matthew Shepard has served us well. You realize that. He has served us well. And I do not mean to condemn Matthew to perfection, but I cannot name a single person who has done more for this community than Matthew Shepard. And I'm not just going to sit here and say, oh, I was this bold guy. No fear. I was scared. I was very vocal in this community when this happened. And I thought, you know, should we call the bishop and ask for his permission to do the vigil? And I was like, hell no. I'm not going to call the bishop. His permission doesn't make it correct. You'll realize that. And I'm not knocking bishops, but what's correct is correct. You two are just out here on a search, though. I will do this. I will trust that if you write a play about this, that you say it right. You say it correct. You think violence is what they did to Matthew? They did do violence to Matthew, don't get me wrong. But, you know, whenever you're called a fag or a
dyke.
Or a dyke. Yeah, a dyke. You do realize that is violence. That is the seed of violence. And I would resent it immensely if you used anything that I said to somehow cultivate that kind of violence. You need to know that.
Thank you, Father, for saying that.
Just deal with what is true. You know what is true. You need to do your best to say it correct.
Hello?
Reverend?
Yes, hello?
I believe your wife told you a bit about why I'm contacting you.
Yes, she has, and I don't know that I necessarily would like to be speaking about this. I'm somewhat involved, and I just don't think...
Yes, I completely understand. I don't blame you. You know, I went to your service on Sunday.
You went to the services on Sunday?
Yes, this Sunday.
On Sunday?
This Sunday.
Did I meet you?
Yes, I believe you welcomed me in the beginning.
I see. Now let me tell you, I'm not afraid to be controversial or to speak my mind. But that is not necessarily the views of my congregation per se. Now, as I said, I'm somewhat involved. That the people of the case, well, the girlfriend of the accused is a member of our congregation. And one of the accused has visited. Now, those two people, the accused, have forfeited their lives. We've been after those two I mentioned for ages, trying to get them to live right, to do right. Now, one boy's on suicide watch, and I'm working with him. Until they put him in the chair and turn on the juice, I will work for his salvation. Now, I think that they deserve the death penalty. I will try to deal with them spiritually. Now, as for the victim, I know that that lifestyle is legal. But I will tell you one thing. I hope that as Matthew lay tied to that fence, that he had the time to reflect on a moment in his life when somebody had spoken the word of the Lord to him. And that just before he slipped into his coma, he had a chance to reflect on his lifestyle.
Thank you, Reverend. I appreciate your speaking with me.
It was 11:30 that night. I had just barely gone to bed, and Margot, our chief operating officer, called and said, his blood pressure has started to drop. Well, let's wait and see. She called me again about 10 after. He just died. So I quick got dressed and came in and went into the ICU where the family was, and Judy came up to me and she put her arms around me, and I put my arms around her. And we stood there, honestly, for about 10 minutes, just 'cause what else do you do? And we had to sit down and talk about things that you just... Dennis, it's now public knowledge. I have to go out there and tell the world that this has happened. Because by this point, it was clear to us. It was the world. It was the whole world. And so Judy told me what she wanted me to say, and I went out there at 4 a.m. At midnight of Monday, October 12th, Matthew Shepard's blood pressure began to drop. We immediately notified the family, who were already at the hospital. At approximately 12:53 a.m., October 12th, Matthew Shepard died. His family was at his bedside. The family did release the following statement. The family wishes for me to express their gratitude towards the whole world for their overwhelming response for their son. The family also wishes to... The family was grateful that they did not have to choose whether or not to continue life support for their son. Like a good son, Matthew was caring, and he removed stress and guilt from the family. Matthew entered the world premature, and he left the world premature. The mom said this: go home, give your kids a hug, and don't let a single day go by where you don't tell them that you love them. Well, I don't know how I let it happen. I lost it on national television. But we had been up for like 72 hours and gone home and gone to sleep for like 30 minutes and had to get up and come back in. And maybe I was just I don't know. But in a moment of complete brain deadness, I started thinking about my own 4 daughters and go home and hug your kids. And though she doesn't even have her kids anymore, I guess I just didn't understand the magnitude with which some people hate. And of all the letters that we got, there were maybe 2 or 3 that were like that. They were all just, thank you for your caring and compassion. And Matthew had caring and compassion from the moment that he got here.
I spoke with Doc today and told him that we would soon be coming back out to Laramie for the upcoming trials of Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson, and that's what he had to say.
If they put those 2 boys to death, that would be going against everything Matt would be thinking on about them. He would want to leave them with hope. H-O-P-E. Just like the whole world hoped Matt would survive. The whole thing, you see. The whole thing ropes around hope. H-O-P-E.
The day of the funeral, it was snowing so bad, these big, huge, wet snowflakes. And when I got there were thousands of people just dressed in all black with umbrellas. And there was 2 churches, one for the immediate family, invited guests, people of that nature, and then the other one was just for everybody else. But still, there was hundreds of people that couldn't fit into either of them. So there was this big park by the church, and that's where all these people were. And that park was full.
The liturgy today is an Easter liturgy. It finds its meaning in the resurrection. The service invites your full participation. May the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray.
And that was the worst storm that they have had, like that anybody could ever tell. Like the trees fell down and the power went out for a couple of days because of it. And I just thought, it's like the forces of the universe at work, you know? I mean, whatever higher spirits you know was like that blows storms was blowing this storm.
For our brother Matthew, let us pray to our Lord Jesus Christ, who said, I am the resurrection and the life. We pray to the Lord.
Hear us, Lord.
O Lord, you who consoled Martha and Mary in their distress, come near to us while we mourn for our brother Matthew and dry the tears of those who weep. We pray to the Lord.
Hear us, Lord.
You wept at the grave of Lazarus, your friend. Comfort us in our sorrows. We pray to the Lord.
My most striking memory from the funeral was seeing the Reverend Fred Phelps from Kansas. That scene go up in the park.
Do you believe in the Bible? Do you believe you should separate the precious from the vile? Now you don't believe in that part of the Bible. You stand over there ignorant to the fact that every time the Bible talks about God's love, it talks about God's hate.
A bunch of high schoolers who got out early came over and started yelling at some of the protesters, the Fred Phelps people. And across the street, you had people lining up for the funeral. I remember this guy. I remember this skinhead coming over from across the street, and he was dressed in leather and spikes everywhere. And he was coming over from across the street, over towards the protesters, and he went into the crowd, and I thought, oh man, this is going to be an ugly confrontation. But instead, he starts leading them in amazing grace.
We wouldn't be here if this was just another murder trial. The state deals with murders every single day. But instead, we're out here because the fags are trying to make Matthew Shepard into the poster boy for the gay lifestyle. It's a determination. It's a determination that God's hatred is pure.
After seeing Fred Phelps protesting at Matthew's funeral and finding out that he was coming to Laramie for the trial of Russell Henderson, I decided that someone needed to stand toe-to-toe with this guy and show the differences. And I think at times like this, when we're dealing with hatred, as much as the nation is right now, that someone needs to show that there's a better way of dealing with this kind of hatred. And so our design is we are going to dress up as angels. And for our design, our wings are going to be huge. They're going to be these big-ass wings. And there'll be 10 to 20 of us that are dressed up as angels. And what we're going to do is we're going to encircle Phelps. And because of our big wings, we're going to completely block him. So these big-ass bands of angels comes in, and we don't say a fucking word. We just turn our backs and we stand there. And we're a group of people bringing forth the message of peace and love and compassion. And we're calling it Angel Action. Yeah, this 21-year-old little lesbian is ready to walk the line with him.
When those old preachers laid their hands on me, it's called an ordination. Then they deliver a charge. Mine was from Isaiah 58:1. Cry aloud, spare not. Lift up thy voice like a trumpet and show my people their transgressions.
And I knew that my angels were going to be taking the brunt of everything he had to yell and say. And I mean, we were going to be blocking his view, and he was going to be like pissed off to all hell. So I went out and bought all my angels earplugs.
court is in session.
As soon as they started jury selection, everybody was coming into my shop with, I don't want to be on this trial. I hope they don't call me. Or, oh my God, I've been called. How do I get off? Just wanting to get as far away from this as they could. Very fearful that they'd have to be on that trial. And then I heard Henderson had to sit in the courtroom in front of the prospective jurors. And to my understanding, that one of the questions was, would you be willing to put this person to death? And I understand a lot of the comments were, yes, I would.
Yes, Your Honor, I would.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Could you just imagine hearing that? Just juror after juror after juror.
Mr. Henderson, you entered a not guilty plea earlier, but I understand you wish to change your plea today. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You understand, Mr. Henderson, that the recommended sentence here is 2 life sentences?
Yes, sir.
You understand that those sentences may run consecutively or concurrently?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Henderson, I will now ask how you wish to plead. Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Before the court decides whether the sentences will run concurrently or consecutively, I understand that there are statements to be made by at least one individual.
As the grandmother and the person who raised Russell, along with my family, we have written the following statement. Our hearts ache for the pain and suffering that the Shepards have went through. You have been in our prayers since the very beginning. And many times throughout the day, I have thought about Matt. And your family will remain in our prayers and in our thoughts because we know that your pain will never go away. You have been so merciful in allowing us to have this plea, and we are so grateful that you are giving us all the opportunity to live. Your Honor, we as a family hope that as you sentence Russell, you do it concurrently to life terms. For the Russell we know and love, Your Honor, we humbly plead not to take Russell out of our lives forever.
Thank you. Mr. Henderson, you have a constitutional right to make a statement if you would like to do so. Do you have anything you would like to say?
Yes, I would, Your Honor. Mr. and Mrs. Shepard, there is not a moment that goes by that I don't see what happened that night. I know what I did was very wrong, and I regret greatly for what I did. You have my greatest sympathy for what happened. I hope that one day you'll be able to find it in your hearts to forgive me. Your Honor, I know what I did was wrong, and I'm ready to pay my debt for what I did.
Mr. Henderson, you drove the vehicle that took Matthew Shepard to his death. You bound him to that fence in order that he might be more savagely beaten, in order that he might not escape to tell his tale. You left him there for 18 hours, knowing fully well that he was there, perhaps having an opportunity to save his life, and you did nothing. This court does not believe that you feel any true remorse for your part in this matter, and I wonder whether you truly realize the gravity of what you've done. The court finds it appropriate, therefore, that on count 3, that being felony murder with robbery, you are to serve a period of imprisonment for the term of your natural life. And on count 1, kidnapping, you are to serve a period of imprisonment for the term of your natural life. Sentencing for count 1 to run consecutive to count 3.
I've known Russell's family for 38 years. Russell's only 21, so I've known him his entire life. I ordained Russell a priest of the Mormon Church, so when this happened, you can imagine disbelief. after the sentencing, the church decided to hold a disciplinary council, and the result of the meeting was to excommunicate Russell from the church. And what that means is your name is taken off the records of the church, so you just disappear. Russell's reaction to that was not positive. It hurt him, and it hurt him too to realize how serious a transgression he had committed. But I will not abandon Russell. That is because of my religion and my friendship with the family.
My parents. So my parents were like, so what plays are you doing this year at school? And I was like, Angels in America. They're like, Angels in America. Is that play you did in high school, that scene you did in high school? And I was like, yeah. And so she goes, huh. Are you gonna audition for it? And I was like, yeah. And we got this huge argument. And the best thing I knew I had on them was right after they see me on stage, and after Macbeth, and like I killed like a little kid and Lady Macduff and these two other guys. And she goes to me and she goes, well, you know homosexuality is wrong. And she just kept saying that. And I was like, look, Mom, I just played a murderer tonight, and you didn't seem to have a problem with that. I tell you, I've never prepared myself this much for an audition in my life. Never ever, not even close.
Not having to deal with the gay society here that much in Laramie. Well, once we actually started working into the case and actually talking to the gay people here and finding out what their underlying fears were, well, it sort of hit home. This is America. You don't have the right to feel that fear. And there's still going to be people who hold with the old ideals. And I was probably one of them 14 months ago. But I'm not going to put up with it, and I'm not going to listen to it. And if you don't like my views on it, fine. The door goes both ways. Now, I already lost a couple buddies. Now, I don't care. I feel more comfortable, and I can sleep at night.
Well, you're tested every 3 months, and I was able to have DNA work done. So they got me to Fort Collins, they drew blood there, flew to Michigan, did all the DNA work there, and which was about a week later, I knew I was negative for good.
Almost a year to the day that Matthew Shepard died, the trial of Aaron James McKinney was set to begin.
Probably the thing that's on most of your minds is the proceedings of the McKinney case. It's up to the county's attorney office. That will definitely be a death penalty case.
Part of me wants McKinney to get it, but I'm not proud of that. I was on and off and off and on again. I just can't say what I do. I'm just too personally involved.
Oh, I believe in the death penalty, 100%. You know, because I want to make sure that guy's ass dies. This is one instance where I believe with all my heart, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth.
I don't know about the death penalty, but I sure as hell don't ever want to see him walk out of Rollins Penitentiary. I'll pay my nickel or whatever, my little percentage of tax, a nickel a day, make sure that his ass stays in there, never sees society again. Definitely doesn't come into my bar again.
Now, I don't believe in the death penalty. It's too much for me. I don't think one person should get killed as redemption for having killed another. Two wrongs don't make a right.
How can I protest if the Shepards want McKinney dead? I just can't interfere with that. But on a personal level, I knew Aaron in grade school. We never called him Aaron, we called him AJ. How can we put AJ McKinney to death?
All rise. State of Wyoming versus Aaron James McKinney, docket number 6381. The Honorable Barton R. Vaught, presiding. The court is in session.
My name's Rob Dupree, sergeant for the sheriff's office. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. Okay, you guys, you and Russ, you're at the fireside. You're at the fireside by yourselves, right?
Yeah?
Where'd you guys go after you left the fireside?
Some kid went to ride home.
What's he look like?
Like a queer. Such a queer dude.
He looks like a queer.
Yeah, like a fag, you know?
How'd you meet him?
Oh, but he wanted to ride home, so I figured, well, dude's drunk. Let's just take him home.
When did you and Russ talk about jacking him up?
We kind of talked about it at the bar.
Okay, what happened next?
We drove up past Walmart, we got over there, and he starts grabbing my leg and grabbing my genitals. I'm like, look, I'm not a fucking faggot. You touch me again, you're gonna get it. I don't know what the hell he was trying to do, but beat him up pretty bad. I think I killed him.
What'd you beat him with?
Blacked out, fist, pistol, butt of my gun. Wonder what happened to me. I had a few beers, and I don't know. It was like I could see what was going on, but I don't know. It was like someone else was doing it.
What was the first thing that he said or that he did that made you want to hit him?
Well, he started reaching for my leg as if he was going to grab my balls.
Did he ever try to defend himself against you or hit you back?
Yeah, sort of. He tried his little swings or whatever, but it wasn't very effective.
How many times did you hit him inside the truck before you stopped where you left him?
I'd say about 2 or 3 times, about 3 times my fist and about 6 times my pistol.
Did he ask you to stop?
Well, yeah, he was getting the shit kicked out of him.
What did he say?
After he asked me to stop, most of all he was doing was screaming.
So Russ kind of dragged him over the fence, I'm assuming, and tied him up?
Yeah, something like that. I just remember Russ was laughing at first, but then he got pretty scared.
Was Matthew conscious when Russ tied him up?
Yeah, I turned around and told him not to look at my license plate since I was scared he'd tell the police. And so I asked him what my license plate read, and so he read it, and that's why I hit him a few more times.
Just to be sure. You obviously don't like gay people.
No, I don't.
Would you say you hate them?
Well, I wouldn't say I hate them, but, you know, when they start coming on to me and stuff like that, I get pretty aggravated.
Did he threaten you?
This gay dude?
Yeah.
Not really.
Can I just ask you one thing? Why'd you guys take his shoes?
I don't know. I'll never get to see my son again.
I don't know. You'll probably go to court sometime today.
Today? So I'm just gonna go in there and plead guilty or not guilty today?
No. You're just gonna be arraigned today.
He's gonna die for sure?
There's no doubt that Mr. Shepard is gonna die.
So what are they gonna give me? 25 to life or just a death penalty and get it over with?
That's not our job. That's the judge's job and the jury.
Has the jury reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. We, the jury, have impaneled and sworn to the above and entitled case. After having well and truly tried the matter, unanimously find as follows. As to the charge of kidnapping, we find the defendant, Aaron James McKinney, guilty. As to the charge of aggravated robbery, we find the defendant, Aaron James McKinney, guilty. As to the charge of first-degree felony murder, kidnapping, we find the defendant, Aaron James McKinney, guilty.
Aaron McKinney was found guilty of felony murder, which means the jury can give him the death penalty. Later that evening, Judy and Dennis Shepard were approached by McKinney's defense team, pleading for their client's life. Prosecution indicated that they would defer to the family's wishes of whether or not to proceed with the death penalty. Later that morning, Dennis Shepard made this statement. Here's some of what he said.
My son Matthew did not look like a winner. In fact, he was uncoordinated and wore braces from the age of 13 until the day he died. However, in his all too brief life, he proved that he was a winner. On October 6th, 1998, my son tried to show the world that he could win again. On October 12th, 1998, my firstborn son and my hero lost. On October 12th, 1998, my firstborn son and my hero died 50 days before his 22nd birthday. I kept wondering the same thing when I first saw him in the hospital. What would have he become? How could have he changed his piece in the world to make it better? Matt died in a hospital in Fort Collins, Colorado. He actually died in the outskirts of Laramie, tied to a fence. You, Mr. McKinney, with your friend, Mr. Henderson, left him out there by himself. But he wasn't alone. There were his friends with him. Friends that he had grown up with. You're probably wondering who these friends were. First, he had the beautiful night sky and the same stars and moon that we used to look through a telescope. Next, he had the daylight and the sun to shine upon him. And through it all, he was breathing in the scent of pine trees from a snowy range. He heard the wind, the ever-present Wyoming wind for the last time. He had one more friend with him. He had God. And it makes me feel better knowing he wasn't alone. Matt's beating, hospitalization, and funeral focused worldwide attention on hate. Good is coming out of evil. People have said enough is enough. I miss my son, but I'm proud to be able to say that he is my son. Judy has been quoted as being against the death penalty. It's been stated that Matthew was also against the death penalty. Both of these statements are wrong. Matt believed that there were crimes and incidents that justified the death penalty. I too believe in the death penalty. I would like nothing more than to see you die, Mr. McKinney. However, it's the time to begin the healing process, to show mercy for someone who refused to show any mercy. Mr. McKinney, I give you life as hard as it's for me to do so. Every time you celebrate Christmas, the 4th of July, a birthday, remember that Matt isn't. Every time you wake up in your jail cell, remember you had the opportunities and the abilities to stop your actions that night. You robbed me of something very precious to me, and I will never forgive you for that. Mr. McKinney, I grant you life in the memory of one who no longer exists. You have a long life. May you thank Matthew every day for it.
Me and Debris hugged and cried, and everyone had tears in their eyes, and you were just so thankful. And Mr. Shepard was crying, and that got me bawling, and everyone just...
This is all we've lived and breathed for a year, daily. This has been my case, daily. And now it's over.
Maybe we can go on and we can quit being so stuck, you know?
It just hit me today, the minute I got out of the courtroom. That's the reason God wanted me to find him, is for he didn't have to die out there alone. And then I would have came along, no one would have found him for at least a couple weeks. So it makes me feeling better knowing he wasn't alone.
I'm just glad it's over. I really am. Testifying was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the stage, I really do. But basically what you have is lawyers questioning you from over here, and then you have to funnel over to the jury. So basically you have to establish this funneling system. And I mean, that's hard for me. I'm a natural conversationalist. So when someone asks you a question, I look them in the eyes, I answer. But what's tricky is you have to scoot over, funnel your answers over here, but I did that several times throughout this trial.
We spent the last few days packing years worth of materials and saying our goodbyes. We've been here 6 times and conducted over 200 interviews. Jedediah cried when he said goodbye.
Marge wished us luck, and when we asked her how Laramie would feel about seeing a play about itself, she said,
I think we'd enjoy it. To show that it's not the hellhole of the earth would be nice. That depends on how you portray us. And in turn, that depends on how Laramie behaves.
As we were getting off the phone, she said to me,
Now you take care. I love you, honey.
Doc asked me if I wanted to ghostwrite a book about this whole event. Galloway offered me, or anyone else, a place to stay, if and when we do come back to Laramie. He even seemed interested whether there'd be any open auditions for this play.
We left Laramie at about 7 in the evening. On the way back to Denver, I looked out my rearview mirror to take one last look at the town.
And I will speak with you. I will trust that if you write a play about this, that you say it right. You need to do your best to say it correct.
And in the distance, I saw the sparkling lights of Laramie, Wyoming.